Help me reach 2,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I had always been the quiet one in the family, the type who observed more than he spoke, smiled when necessary, and tried not to stir any unnecessary drama. My name is Ethan, and I'm 34, living in a suburban town just outside Chicago. Life had been ordinary but comfortable. Steady job, a modest apartment, and a few close friends who I trusted with my life. But that Saturday was supposed to be a simple family gathering, nothing more than an afternoon brunch at my parents' house for my cousin Rachel's birthday. I had no idea it would be the day everything changed. It started harmlessly enough. My mother, Linda, bustling around the kitchen in her floral apron, chatting about work and neighborhood gossip. My father, David, reclined in his armchair, offering polite smiles to anyone who entered. Cousins and aunts trickled in, laughing, hugging, and exchanging small talk. I arrived a little late, as usual, and waved at a few familiar faces before settling into a corner of the living room with a cup of coffee. I thought I'd escape unnoticed, as I usually did, blending into the background of family interactions. Then Rachel announced that she had a game planned, something about sharing embarrassing stories, the kind that always ends with laughter at someone's expense. I felt a twinge of apprehension but tried to shrug it off. These were my family. I had survived every birthday, wedding, and reunion without incident. How bad could it be? The first story came from my Uncle James, a harmless story about his own college mishap that had everyone in stitches. I laughed along, as did most of the room. Then my cousin Claire spoke up, eyes sparkling mischievously. "Okay, Ethan, your turn." I froze. My stomach sank. I wasn't expecting this. Maybe later," I muttered, trying to sidestep the attention. But the room had a way of closing in when someone tried to avoid the spotlight. Claire's grin widened. "Nope, Ethan. You always sit quietly in the corner. Now it's your turn. Share something funny about yourself, preferably embarrassing." I hesitated, scanning the room. My parents were smiling politely, my cousins watching expectantly. I could feel my chest tighten, my throat dry. I had 1,000 little awkward stories, but nothing I would willingly make public. Before I could think of a way out, Claire leaned closer, lowered her voice just enough for the room to hear. "Oh, come on. Everyone remembers what happened at Ethan's last date, right? The one with Melissa? The one where he cried in the middle of the movie because she laughed at his jokes." The laughter started quietly but gained momentum. Heads turned, whispers traveled. My cheeks burned, hot and heavy, as everyone's gaze fixed on me. I opened my mouth to explain, to correct the version of events that had been exaggerated into something humiliating, but the words caught in my throat. I felt exposed, a spectacle of ridicule. My cousins were smirking, my aunts whispering, my father's eyes avoiding mine, not knowing where to look. I remember the way the room seemed to shrink around me, how the laughter echoed in my ears, growing louder even though it wasn't all that loud. I could feel every eye dissecting me, judging me, reliving a moment from years ago that I had long buried. My mind raced, asking why they found my pain amusing, why they didn't see how deeply this cut. Instead of lashing out, I did something unexpected. I smiled, faint and tight, nodded as if I understood the joke, and simply walked toward the hallway. Everyone thought I was just moving to the kitchen, or perhaps adjusting my seat. But I didn't stop. I walked past the coat rack, through the side door that led to the garage, and out into the cold afternoon air. The shock must have registered because there were murmurs behind me, questions that went unanswered. Outside, the wind hit my face, sharp and biting, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had been raging inside me. My hands shook slightly as I fumbled for my car keys. I didn't check my phone, didn't call anyone. I just drove, aimless at first, letting the city streets guide me without a plan. Every stoplight, every passing stranger, felt like a small reprieve from the judgment I had left behind. I ended up at a small park on the outskirts of town, an open field with a few scattered benches and a faint smell of damp earth. I sat on the nearest bench, shoulders hunched, and just breathed. The laughter, the whispers, the eyes, they were all still there in my mind, but the distance between me and the house gave me clarity I hadn't felt in years. I realized that I had always tried to blend in, to be polite, to never create waves. But moments like these made me question why I subjected myself to public scrutiny for people who didn't value the depth of who I was. By the time the sun began to dip, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet, I knew something had shifted. I hadn't yelled, hadn't confronted anyone, hadn't begged for apologies or explanations. I had simply disappeared. And in that disappearance, I felt a strange sense of control, a quiet rebellion against the humiliation I had endured. I didn't know what the next steps would be. Would I return? Would I confront them later? Or would I remain gone, letting my absence speak louder than any words could? For the first time that day, I felt a sliver of relief. Not because I had escaped, but because I had chosen my own path, my own moment of dignity. And though the evening was far from over, the power of stepping away, of refusing to be complicit in my own humiliation, settled over me like a heavy but necessary weight. I stayed on that bench long after twilight swallowed the park, letting the chill of the evening seep into my bones. My phone buzzed a few times, but I didn't answer. Messages from my parents, my cousins, even Claire, mostly concerned or apologetic, some subtly accusing me of overreacting. I read a few, then locked the screen. The words didn't matter. Tonight wasn't about explanations or excuses. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been quietly trampled under the weight of family expectations and public mockery. After an hour, I drove to a small diner downtown. Neon lights flickered, casting a warm glow on the wet asphalt outside. I ordered coffee, black, and sat in a corner booth where I could watch the door. People came and went, their laughter and chatter a faint echo compared to the storm that had been inside me. I didn't want company, didn't want advice, didn't want someone to say, "It's just family, Ethan. Don't take it so personally." I didn't want platitudes. I wanted space, solitude, and the clarity that comes with being truly unseen. As I sipped my coffee, my mind replayed the scene over and over. Claire's smirk, the exaggerated laughter, the whispers. I realized then that it wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about control, about demonstrating who held power in the room. And for years, I had let to define my role silently. The quiet, unassuming cousin, the safe target for jokes, the one who would never fight back. But stepping out had changed that dynamic, even if only for a moment. By the time I returned home, the city streets were nearly empty and a strange calm had settled over me. I let myself into my apartment, the familiar creak of the door almost soothing. I didn't unpack my coat immediately. I just sat on the sofa, thinking about what I would do next. Could I go back tomorrow as if nothing happened? Could I pretend that the humiliation had no effect? I doubted it. Something inside me had shifted irreversibly. I knew I couldn't return to being invisible, not for them, not for anyone. The next morning, my phone exploded with missed calls and messages. My mother sounded frantic, almost pleading. My father's texts were terse but concerned. Claire had sent a string of apologies, her tone shaky. I read them all, but I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to decide, not just what I would say to them, but what I would allow myself to feel. The anger, embarrassment, and shame had to be acknowledged, but I wouldn't let them dictate my reaction. I refused to give them that satisfaction. By afternoon, I made a decision. I called my mother first. "Linda," I said calmly, my voice steady. "I'm okay. I just needed to step away and think." There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice cracked with relief. She didn't press for details. She just wanted to know that I was safe. Next, I texted my father. Short, composed, no dramatics. "I need space, but I'm okay. I'll contact you soon." And for the rest of the family, I sent a single group message. "I left yesterday because I needed a moment to collect myself. I'm okay now. I'll be in touch." No explanations, no justification, no excuses. That evening, I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I felt a quiet pride, the kind that comes from standing up for yourself without anger or confrontation. The humiliation still stung in memory, but it no longer controlled me. I had faced it, stepped away, and emerged with my dignity intact. And in that moment, I realized something profound. True strength wasn't about fighting the moment. It was about choosing when, where, and how to fight, or whether to fight at all. A few days later, I returned to family home, not as a timid cousin who shrank in a corner, but as someone who had established boundaries. The atmosphere was tentative at first. I could feel the awkward tension as I entered, everyone aware of the previous disaster. But I didn't flinch, didn't apologize unnecessarily, didn't let them sense the lingering embarrassment. I greeted each of them politely, smiled when appropriate, and carried myself with a calm composure that surprised even me. The day passed without incident. No jokes at my expense, no whispers, no exaggerated stories. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But I knew it was there. In their eyes, in their gestures, in the way the room felt lighter somehow. I had changed the narrative. I wasn't the punchline anymore. I was the person who had walked away calmly, reclaimed control, and returned on my own terms. That evening, alone in my apartment, I reflected on what had happened. Family, I realized, could sometimes hurt more than strangers because they knew your weaknesses, your insecurities, your patterns. And while you couldn't always control their actions, you could control your response. My calm disappearance hadn't been an escape. It had been a statement, a refusal to participate in my own degradation. And for the first time in years, I felt fully seen, not by them, but by myself. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat by the window, watching the city lights blink in rhythm with my heartbeat. I didn't know what future gatherings would hold. Maybe there would be apologies. Maybe not. Maybe family would understand. Maybe not. But one thing was certain. I had learned the value of self-respect, the power of measured action, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing when to step away. That day, a family party had tried to humiliate me publicly. My calm response, my complete disappearance, had ensured that the humiliation ended where it began, with them, and the dignity remained entirely with me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.